Welcome to Community Conversations, where we will be bringing you fascinating discussions with local leaders about topics that everybody's talking about. I'm Dr. Cynder Sinclair, and I will be your host today. Our special guest is Sarah York Rubin, and Sarah is the Executive Director of Santa Barbara County's Office of Arts and Culture. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me today,
Oh,
Cynder.
gosh, I'm so glad you're here. You have a story, and our audience is going to love it. Okay, where are we going to start? So I know in 2016, you moved here cross country to take the job, and you blew into Santa Barbara with this fabulous high energy that you have. And here's what I find fascinating. You have a very expansive, inclusive way of looking at art. And so that's kind of where I'd like to start, because I certainly haven't thought about art the way that you do. So talk to us about that, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. And I hope maybe that this would help other people to see their world a little bit differently. But I think, in the broad sense, art is all around us. But truly creative expression is something that's, separates us as humans. It's a thing where we perceive the world and express ourselves and try to connect with each other. And so the simple things like who designed your scarf, or botanical artists, culinary artists, the food that we eat. We have the vintners, that's an art, literary artists, writers, people in front of the screen that you see, actors, but also television personalities, and film artists, people behind the scene who are sound artists running sound, or, as I deconstruct the room around us. But I think just thinking about where people have put so much thought and vision and expertise and kind of personal lens into the world that we get to experience every day, it's a gift. And I think it's probably a nicer way to live, because it really makes the care more evident.
So for us to look at art in a different way, in a more expansive way, is one thing. And for people to think of themselves as artists, if you would ever ask me, are you an artist? Oh my gosh, no, I'm not an artist. But I think a lot of people don't think of themselves as artists, but in fact they are. So give us some examples, like even you mentioned the murals at the parks.
Yeah, and I think it's a hard, you think about artists and you think capital A, and people usually go painting,
Right.
And then they usually go to, the classic European examples that you learned when you were 8. You read about Vincent van Gogh, and kind of, I think people's understanding sticks there. But because art's creative expression, and it's through your gift or through your lens, if you walk through, Ortega Park has fantastic murals and a fantastic community mural program. Mm-hmm. And the mentors there's artist mentors who work with the kids, and it's part of the landscape. And I don't even think people necessarily stop and look at the murals or notice it. And I think murals is even a pretty straightforward. It's painted on a wall near you. I think it's one of the easiest ones if you go by the classic definition. And it still kind of blends into the background. And, if you walk around Santa Barbara, there is a lot of public art and really beautiful muralism. Mm-hmm. And it's really, it tells a story about our community and the people who live here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so I'm hoping that people will really take a page out of your book and look at art and themselves in a completely different way, more inclusive, more expansive. Take it all in.
Yeah, that would be my hope. And also, I think it's a way to take yourself seriously.
Yeah.
To process your feelings and your emotions, and to express those, and to give yourself some space to to do that with kind of respect and humility for whatever we come up with. But we're so hard on ourselves, and the world is such a hard place. And I think it really, there's so many factors outside of our control that contribute to uh, making a lot of it harder. And so to take out time, even if it's, gardening, making a beautiful space for yourself in
Right.
your yard, and to respect the work and thought that you put into that, to cultivating space is important, I think. And I think it's important that we also extend that respect to each other. I think both get lost.
That's a very good point. I love your term creative expression.
It's what it is. It's our unique filter. We all, everyone walks into this room and there's the same things that we can all see, but what comes out of, what we will remember might be something fundamentally different. If somebody's visual, it might be the green of a plant, or the texture of a wall behind you, or the sound of your voice. And I think that's a gift. I love knowing what other people think and see, and seeing it through their eyes.
Yes.
And I think that's something we need more of. That building of empathy, compassion, connection.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so now if I remember right, when you came first to your job as executive director, you made some changes right away. And one of them was the name, if I remember right. But talk to us about the changes you made, I know, along with your team.
Along with my team and along with our community, there's nothing I do as a leader that's not supported by other leaders and collaborators and partners, and certainly the Office of Arts and Culture team. But even like the model of my organization, we're government, which surprises people, and a collaboration between the city and the county, and it's going on like 40 years that the two have worked together to share. And I think the idea is that they're stronger and more resilient together. And I think our work is like that, because there's so many hours in the day and always, constraints about time or budget. And everyone brings something different to the table. And looking at the Arts Commission, who we work with, and the Office of Arts and Culture, something that was really important to me was to add culture, because I think cultural expression can be creative expression, but can also be unique unto itself. And so I think a person's life experience, ancestry, current inclination, I think it's a really wide range. In the San Ynez Valley, there's equestrian culture, but Santa Barbara County is so special because we have so many, and to create space for that and celebrate that, I think is largely, it doesn't change what we do, but I think it changes how we think about it.
Yeah, and I've heard you say that really our art in Santa Barbara is one of the things that makes us such a really vibrant community.
Oh, we punch so far outside of our weight class, to say, and I think you see that reflected. People come from all over the world to be here, and part of that, it's beautiful. The weather is beautiful.
Sure.
There is an ocean, but I also think the ocean is many places, and our weather is pretty great, but we're more than palm trees, and our the venues that we have, the beautiful theaters, the quality, the caliber of both the like formal institutions, like your art museum, but also just the community gatherings and community, gathering groups like our gay men's chorus. They perform usually. I've seen them in churches, and it's not a billboard and nothing that you might know about, but the quality of their music is exceptional, and the I think community enthusiasm behind it is also, and I attribute a lot of that to back to government. I think the city, especially of Santa Barbara, and if we're talking about within the immediate, Santa Barbara area, has doubled down on its arts investment year after year and prioritized that. And it's intentional and it's a choice, and it's not something that just happens. It's a collective will. And I really think that having that support of the city over the years again and again is, it's not by accident that Santa Barbara is wonderful. It's a lot of support from artists and dedication and community, and also I think government trying to meet that to sustain it.
I think that's so important for us to remember that it's intentional. It's not by accident that we have such a rich art community that draws so many people here. Now, let me ask you this. Do you think it's unusual that that the government would support art and encourage art and really be so intentional about including art in the community? Do you think that's unusual for when you look at other communities?
Yeah, it's interesting because if you look internationally, in many places it's embedded into the fabric of society, where it's more, I think, and the things I'm saying about this is art, this is art, this is art, I think that's not necessarily a unique perspective. I think it's a unique perspective in the United States, and I think it's a unique perspective in California, perhaps. But in terms of government support for the arts, in some places, like Minnesota, the state government, it's like, $10 a person, which goes, when you multiply, that adds up. And when you go to California, we rank in like the bottom 1/4%. We're like 57 cents a person.
Oh, golly.
And it, if there's not that larger infrastructure, because it's all trickle down. So the federal government, state, local, kind of everyone needs to be in to build it up. And so I think as, you get to California, you don't see it as much. And that was, as an outsider, you hear about Hollywood and you hear about California being so progressive. And I just assumed that arts education here would be so robust and that there would be so much support for it. And that was one of my biggest surprises, was learning that it wasn't as common here. But also I think that makes the mission to uphold it all the more essential and needed. And also the work that has been done and is being done here, I think all the more special, because these are deliberate choices that people are making. It's not just a same old culture. This is active community investment, government investment, artist investment.
So what have you seen in other places? Say, before you came here, what have you seen in other communities, let's say?
Something that really surprised me, I used to run a performing arts center in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Woohoo!
And, an example is, and there was a tremendous amount of funding support there. Some of it, I call it the guilty steal money, but those legacy foundations where they, kind of, ravaged in some way the Rust Belt of the United States, and then, really made enough money that they've established these endowments that in some ways I think try to atone for, like the Carnegie Library system. It's, established libraries all over the country. And, from an industry, I'm like gazillionaire. I'm trying to figure out how to translate what amount would have been made then to now. But Pittsburgh had some, public-private partnership infrastructure, but then we presented international groups, and they were often funded by their governments to come perform for us.
Oh,
So it wasn't
okay.
even, they were, there was support for them to, for people to take dance lessons in the community and go to dance school. And that was supported. And then there were paid jobs for dancers on the other end, and venues for those dancers, and all of that was set up. So not only were they caring for their own community and their own people, but then they invested in doing almost art, ambassadorship.
Yeah.
Where they're like, here's our culture, as in Montreal, a Quebecois group we worked with. But the thing we can do best for our people also is to share that culture with other cultures. And so seeing, I think, the ecosystem, even though there wasn't a direct benefit that they could see by sending their dance groups abroad, but believing in the larger holistic connectedness of establishing that understanding about who they were and why.
Well, so do you see anything that Santa Barbara can learn or emulate when you think about some of these other ways of looking
Doing
at art?
things? That's a great question. I do think in some ways to start locally. I think, to always, it's never. I think artists, it's always a good investment, and the cost benefit of what it costs to support, something to be made or created and shared. I think that's really worthy. But to support the understanding here of why it's important would be, I think, a necessary step to then supporting, if we wanted to send our arts folks as ambassadors, which we should. I think it would help people to understand why we should do that and why they have messages and talents to share. And so I think, again, still building up more and more of that. I think cognizance of these fabulous makers we have here, of the culture that represents, of why that's important, and having those conversations is as, if not more important, as, again, like doing a program where you'd establish funding for those people to go travel and learn in other places.
So as you think about yourself, so from 2016 until now, you've been here, and you've seen a lot of things before you came here.
Yeah.
And so
also,
when you look to the future in your position, maybe you're going to bring some of those ideas. Maybe you're kind of moving forward and bringing us with you towards some of those fabulous ways of approaching art.
I think in some ways, like, I would love to claim that, but with humility, the world has changed so much, and I learn new things every day. And I think if anything has changed, it's my what I've learned from our next generations and their voices and their experiences. And so as much as I, have seen and known, and definitely am inspired by in places I've lived, and those have been really important. I think making space for our next generation thinkers and artists and kids to shape the world now that they will inherit is so essential, and to honor their feelings and their voices. And so in some ways it's almost, again, that moving back and moving forward simultaneously. I think the vision can and should change as we go. I do think in, since 2016, there've been a series of, we're world's hard, you know, and especially in Santa Barbara, you know, there was the Thomas Fire, the debris flow,
Right.
the pandemic, which, you know, back to art and isolation and connecting. But I do think the racial reckoning and the more open dialogues that everyone has been having about systemic racism and the quality collectively of life that we experience when they're like when we're perpetuating kind of those barriers for everyone to enjoy that prosperity. It seems like people really heard that, and I think art heard that too. And so something I'm really excited about for the arts and also for expansive thinking is that it's time for more and new voices to be heard and honored. And not that I think people haven't been creating, but I think the inclusion of more, you know, more racially diverse, more diverse voices kind of in the narrative, in the building of a future for what art can be. And also looking at, you know, that is keeping things culturally relevant, just like for our next generations. But who are we making art for? Whose stories are we telling? Who gets to tell their stories? You know, who gets self-expression? Who gets that platform? What space do we make? I think it's an exciting time. I think it will be better. I think art and culture and our experience of it is only going to be better and better as we bring in new ideas and represent more experiences. And I also think that more people will relate to it because more people will see themselves.
Yes, more people will see themselves. So, do you work with schools as well? When I think about, you know, you're talking about the young people coming up.
Oh, we do to some extent, and we partner with organizations like Children's Creative Project.
Oh, of course.
You know, that work with schools, or through we administer cultural arts grant programs for the city, the county, and the state, and some of that funding goes towards school programs. We facilitate a high school poetry program, hearing the young poets and what they have to say. It's called Poetry Aloud.
Yeah.
It's a national program, but there's local levels. Is amazing. They have so much to say.
So, I've heard you say something about how you like to encourage artists to advocate for themselves. So maybe talk a little bit about what that is, how they can do it, how they do it, what you would like to see.
I think part of what happens, and part of the reason that maybe art isn't, you know, self-perpetuating, recognized in the way that it should be, is because art, there's like a passion component to it. You know, people would do this whether or not they were paid, because they are compelled to do it. I'm a painter, I must paint. They love to do it. And I think then people say, well, then it doesn't have as much value. But I think if you're going to hire someone to paint a mural, that just like you would pay a plumber to fix a toilet, you should pay a muralist to paint something on your wall, because it's skilled labor, and it's a product, and it's time, and it's expertise. And I think people, you know, focus more on like, so-and-so, this opportunity that you have to paint a mural. You know, I think the perspective is that the chance to fix the toilet is the gift. And obviously, you know, that's not, you know, a one-to-one, and the chance is a gift. But I think to begin compensating, especially a lot of our gig, you know, musicians, you know, you look at just the gig economy, and to really start to assign the economic value that it generates, that other people profit from, to compensating the people so that they can sustain that is so important. And I think especially like the Central Coast and Santa Barbara, you know, part of what makes this such a special place to live is all of the creative people who live here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, if you look at our film artists or our musicians, you want to go see what they make. You want to enjoy public access television. You want to go dance at Soho. And all of those make it such a better place to live. But if we're not paying those people to do those things, they can't afford to live here. And so I think to keep this wonderful quality of life for wonderful with an understanding that obviously that's different for everyone, but we're going to need to pay the people who enhance our lives to stay here and to keep doing that. And I think a future where the creatives couldn't afford to live in a place where they would then imbue the world with their creativity is a sad town. Is this and so I'm hopeful, and I'm hopeful that artists too. It's hard to say this thing that I care about that's part of my ego, I should also be paid for it. And because there aren't as many, just for all the reasons that we talked about in terms of types of art that you produce, there's not like an easy standardized rate book. There is a program that I love from New York. It's called WAGE, Working Artists for a Greater Economy. And it's a tool, and it's based on New York economic factors, but for creatives to calculate an hourly, or at least a starting point. And I wished one of my past paths, I was a writer. And so I would write for museums. And, they asked me what I charged, and it was so hard to, what is that right number? But with WAGE, you calculate, how many years of education do I have? Do I have a workspace that I have to pay for? Is there software, computers? What are the costs that I've incurred and the time that I have devoted to developing this expertise? And, are there materials, that I will need to do this thing? And at least gives people a starting point where it's not abstract, to be able to say with kind of more confidence, like, yeah, this is what it would cost to work with me, and to understand more clearly about why that's reasonable, and, not an emperor's new clothes thing, but, why it's okay to ask for that. And I want people to know that they should, assert that value. And for artists to start ideally feeling more comfortable when they're working to ask for pay for that work.
So, it's sort of a mindset for artists as well as for the public.
Everyone.
So for Santa Barbarans can help support the art, encourage artists by sort of changing their thinking in how they pay for that, not asking people to do some things for free because, it's a quote-unquote opportunity, and then for the artists themselves to, like you say, advocate for them. That's sort of the next step up, I think.
And we tried to actually, so we facilitate the cultural arts grants programs, like I mentioned, and one of the qualifications that things are evaluated on that we've added is inclusion of paid artists in the program. Because there's so many applications that, I want to do a community mural, and these great artists have volunteered. So the budget's not that expensive because we just need to pay for paint, and you get things like that. And it's like the budget's so low because everyone's doing it for free.
Oh, gosh.
And so we tried to figure out how to reframe that as a goal. Like, yes, we want to be cost effective. Yes, we want to do the most we can for our dollars. But also, a huge component of supporting that mural and that economy and that community placemaking is supporting those people that you'd want to do that work and continue doing that work and not to divorce those things.
Yeah.
And so it's in the grant criteria.
Okay, let's sort of switch gears.
Okay.
And let's go back before 2016. You have had some fascinating jobs. Oh my gosh. Cartoon voiceovers. You're a DJ. Holy cow. So tell us about what you were doing before you came to Santa Barbara.
Before I came. It's funny when I talk about it now, it seems kind of disjoint. It all made sense. Like in the flow of youth. I'll start at the beginning with mindfulness of time. In college, I studied creative writing and poetry.
Alrighty then.
Right? Which led to, we had a public radio station I went to. For undergraduate, I went to Michigan. And I got to interview writers. And, like, fantastic writers. Like, Pulitzer Prize winning writers. The person who wrote Hamilton.
Oh, golly.
Pulitzer, like, the level of dialogue and kind of like this, the conversations that you got to have were tremendous. And so it was a talk show. It was a radio talk show. And on occasion, the engineer wouldn't be able to make it because it was college. But then you'd have somebody, really, really wonderful. Eric Schlosser, he just had written Fast Food Nation, I think was one of, I don't know if you remember that book. But he was there to meet with me, and we didn't have an engineer to record the interview. So I learned how to sound engineer.
Wow.
So, which, not to the level, obviously, of what probably people will be hearing at home with the clarity of the audio here, but enough so that I could capture it and wouldn't lose it. And then with another background in performing arts, I combined that with records because it was a radio station and they had amazing equipment. And so learned how to DJ on their turntables with their vinyl collection. And because it was outside of Detroit, vinyl was abundant. And there were warehouses for raves sometimes or events.
Yeah.
Not just raves, mostly not. And a tremendous amount of like Motown, Motown vinyl. And so I started DJing. And again, it wasn't a thing that I would ever do for money until somebody asked, would you do this? How much do you charge? And it shocked me that, yeah, I guess this is the thing. And so I started to take gigs, and that helped to pay for my graduate degree.
Oh, right.
And so that
Very
was kind
ingenious.
of the music. And it kind of helped to, it just helped to cover the costs of school. And it was also really, I think working in galleries and things too was great because you didn't have to keep people dancing. You could be more experimental. So I loved art galleries and art walks. It just keeps, and then I landed, in Washington, D.C. and volunteered at there's an independent film festival. I think it's just like, again, because art's all interconnected. And they said, you're a DJ, right? Do you want to do a music festival? I've always wanted a music festival. And when it wasn't a lot more complicated than that. So it's kind of like each thing was just adjacent to another art form, was adjacent to another art form. And I had the privilege and agency to pursue some of those things. I definitely walked dogs for money while I did the music festival because that was not high paying.
But you were so open to everything, and
there's
of course,
also that.
attracted because there was an element of art in it. But you were like, oh, heck yeah, I can do that. Oh yeah, that sounds like fun. Like, move out of my way, I'll do that. That's fabulous.
It is fabulous. And it was also fun, and it's so many of the same types of people or sets of creatives, and And I really think, back to art is about ideas. And so often it just comes back to people who are curious, or who appreciate other people's curiosity or expression. And so I think the nucleus is so similar through all of it, is this experience and sharing of ideas. And so even though the art forms can be incredibly different, you could do film, you could do music, and how people relate to them is, I think the baseline concept of sharing ideas or thinking differently or understanding differently, I think that it extends across all of the different art forms.
Well, and speaking of vinyl, you hauled 8 crates of records, vinyl, here in your car when you came
We had a
to
U-Haul. We had a U-Haul.
U-Haul. Okay, fine. So you hauled those with you all the way cross country.
It's funny because I brought that up because I was proud for only having 8. Like my takeaway from our conversation earlier about that was like, I couldn't bring 200. That would have been ridiculous. I narrowed it down to 8. So that you're like, you brought 8, which I'm sure my husband also thought. So I think you're probably on the same page.
Yeah.
Like we didn't bring our bed, but because there wasn't room, But yeah, I have a lot of vinyl.
Mostly Motown?
A lot of Motown, a lot of soul, but then just neat things that I've, picked up over the years. Pittsburgh, Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers is from Pittsburgh, and there was a ton of his recordings, his music on vinyl, and he was such an interesting thinker and speaker, and sometimes, and this is more for like the trippy stuff, but you can layer his voice over or that music over something else, and it's really good layering stuff. So there's a lot of that, and then there's just music that I enjoy, and Coltrane, just like love to listen to over and over again. And a lot of jazz, I think, and soul from when I lived in Washington, D.C. I lived in the U Street area, which was kind of a jazz corridor. And so there's some really beautiful music that had been recorded there, like some wonderful, like Nina Simone. I'm like, I get so excited about the musicians. I'm like, I'll show you sometime. I'll try not to.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to see.
Travel down that path. But yeah, so lots of vinyl.
So, Sarah, tell us about a pivotal experience in your life.
A pivotal experience. It's funny because I think all the biggest ones are moments when I've been humbled, and in big ways and small. I think if I go to the big one, and maybe it's kind of like that's kind of the opposite of something that happens or occurs differently. But my mom was an 8th grade literature teacher, and she, as part of her class, kept a costume closet, and the kids could do their book reports or whatever in costume. They could just pick out
cool.
whatever they want, and it was like they were 13. And I think, again, just like self-expression, like people just want to share, like I am now, like this is what I think about the world. And we had costumes. Our whole basement was full of costumes. We also loved Halloween. And it was so normative for me. And I think there was like somebody, I think it was like a new kid in one of her classes I'd come over, it was like an alien land when he walked into the classroom, and I just walked, it was just a conversation they were having, but he just like didn't understand like why there were costumes. Because it's weird. It's weird. It's a little bit weird.
It's unusual, maybe.
Yeah, right? Not weird. Unusual. And she was trying to explain it, and he still wasn't having it. And then I'm from a small town, from a farm town, a small town, even though I then lived in a lot of cities. But I went back to like drop off, I don't know, something like cookies for their bake sale. I was in high school, and he was in like a full like vaudevillian wig, like presenting to the class and radiant.
Golly.
And it was, again, a reminder, like, what, this starfish, this kid, this platform, this moment, making space to listen. And I always remembered it. And then she would get letters I have hundreds of letters that kids sent to her over the years.
To your mom.
Saying that time when you, let me be who I was or made space. There was a kid, I don't know if goth is the word they would use now, but there was a kid who did piercings. And so for show and tell, I think my mom let her pierce her ear. I don't know if that would be allowed in like a classroom these days.
Right.
The teacher was like, yeah, bring your needle and let's show all the other, but like, but I think just even on the smallest level, I think that respect of, I see what you do and I appreciate it and I don't judge it, and how much it meant to those kids and how much you could visibly and immediately see the difference it made. And then years later, the things that they would write and then they would say, and really hard, like some of them would say, like, I was suicidal at that time. I was feeling so-and-so. I was experiencing like hard things. And your act of kindness and also the safe space for me just to act out or show how I felt saved my life.
Wow. I'd say that's pivotal.
It's, and I think my mom was a hero, and also art saves lives. When people say that, I think it's really real.
So it seems like, or let me ask you, would you say that you got your love of art and or at least your way of looking at things more expansively and openly, inclusively, would you say you got that from your mom? Whether it was inherited or whether it was being around her.
You're like nature, totally. I think, and my father, who was an elementary school principal, and as I speak about costumes, like,
oh gosh,
they would do he would read Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
So your dad was in on
dressed
the
up as Goldilocks to the kids. He was like Little Bo Peep every year in our like family Halloween. I think they were just really supportive of creativity, of reading. They, back to the ideas thing, just like learning and seeing new ideas, and just they took me to, I think one year, like 20 different places of worship, just to see how different people, communed with their own religion or faith or connectedness in those cultures, and just to sit there and see that, and and there was never like a was that good, was that bad, like there was not a good bad filter in my childhood. It was more like, this is how some people do this thing and this is how others, and and how you choose to do any of them is up to you. But the idea of holding respect for, again, all different types of expression, and making space for that same sort of thing where they really supported that learning, and also concerts and plays, and they were great parents.
It seems to me, listening to you, that all of us can learn from your mom and dad, and now from you, about really helping people feel seen, to really notice them and give them sort of a platform to be themselves, even if they don't know what that is.
Yeah, even if we don't know what that is. I think it's, especially people we love. You look at kids or grandkids or, I think people, especially who are at that stage of finding their voices,
Uh-huh.
but it's not even, I think my mom, when she was 70, really, I think got into, it was some type of wool dyeing. I still don't understand fully what it was, but for quilts and for quilting. And it brought her so much joy and was not something she'd ever done before or had known, and to even take that seriously, like what you make with this thing is so cool. And it's
Yeah.
a quilt now that's in our house. I think it's such a kindness that we can do for each other.
A kindness we can do for each other. I love the way you look at that. Yeah.
And I think it only, listening to each other's feelings. And again, this is where I think art is on that same level of, necessity for public safety as stop signs is the reason why we should do all the other safety prep. Why should you stop at a stop sign? So that you don't hurt someone or yourself. And so I think at that very fundamental existential level, it's so critical, and it can have such deep reverberations. Just that initial act of stopping, listening. I think thanking anyone ever for sharing is just something that like builds us collectively as community.
Yeah, you have a real strong sense of community, and that comes through loud and clear.
And that's my sense, and it doesn't need to be everyone's sense.
Yeah, but it benefits all of us. So thank you for that.
I think generally there's always something we can learn, and we have a beautiful community. It's been such a gift, I think, moving out here too, is you see people's passion for this place and for supporting each other. And in your world, you see like the abundant nonprofits.
Oh, right.
In Santa Barbara County and Santa Barbara, and they're helping nonprofits, in different ways. There's services or support, and so much of that is just a deep passion and compassion, and I think commitment that we all have to making this a good place for everyone.
Yeah.
And you see that in the people you meet here. I think you see that in the willingness that we have a community that has a Cynder to ask questions of local leaders about how and why you think about this way. That your program is here, I think, speaks to the community that wants this program, and that's a community that cares.
Yeah, and a community that supports TV Santa Barbara.
And also in TV
everybody
Santa
can have their
Barbara.
voice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And TV Santa Barbara, I think, is a wonderful organization. And back to the nonprofits, I think incredibly supportive of that ecosystem. And back to government funding, like the city of Santa Barbara helps to provide some of that funding because I think they understand that there's such a value in the communication of what's here, of what's available, of services, of access, of resources to each other. So I think it's all that same ecosystem. Yeah. It's just different ideas or different ways of supporting that are passed through it.
Mm-hmm. So Sarah, we have a few minutes left.
Yeah.
What message might you like to close with that you would have for Santa Barbara folks, how they can support the arts or where you see your department going in the future or whatever message you might have?
I think, first, thank you, Cynder, so much for having me here and to be given this space and this platform. As, the whole thesis of this conversation is a gift. And that you do this for others,
You are a gift to our community, my dear. I'll tell you that.
Oh, no, you. But I think just that mindfulness of, when we walk around, who's here and what are they sharing and how is that communicated in all different ways. I think just being attuned to that or paying attention to it. And also I think just, do you want to be like, I feel like the parent that's like, kids, you don't even know how good you've got it, but like, I think for people who live in Santa Barbara, like how good you've got it. Like you're the art here, the creatives here, the artists here, the ones you see, the ones you don't, and I think if people were ever interested, they should explore if they haven't tried some, Lubero hit a century. It's 100 years old this year. Or, I think the museum, the art museum just did a huge restoration. We have these incredible, big A art spaces. And then we have all of these, smaller community gatherings and community spaces. And I'd really encourage people to participate, to go see those and see what they're doing, and to never, I think sometimes art can sound intimidating, which, there's you think about, all black and I'm going to I'm like French cinema in the 60s. I'm like all black cigarettes. Like that's probably not what people think. But that people would feel welcome to go visit our venues and go meet our artists and talk to each other. And to be reminded, just like sometimes you have to remind people that the beach is here. Like, hey, we're at the ocean. Go to the beach. When's the last time you went to the beach?
Yeah.
I think it's the same for the arts. Like, go, you live in this wonderful, creative town and place. Like, please go, take advantage of that.
Yeah. So for people to really pay attention more, appreciate what we have, support the artists.
Always.
Encourage government to support the artists.
Always, too. And say thank you when government does. I worry because I see it, and that's, I'm like, oh, please, everyone, say thanks, because it's a big deal, and it wouldn't happen without, sometimes hard decisions being made to make sure that arts is still prioritized. And so, I think the expression of gratitude through line.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for all of the amazing work you're doing. Thank you for moving to Santa Barbara and sharing your wonderfulness with us.
It's been so hard. Yeah.
And thanks to you and your team for all the good work you're doing here. And thanks for being on our show. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Cynder.
And thanks for joining us on Community Conversations, and we'll see you next time.